Welcome to the Mad Genius Thesis. You know, we love to unpack the connection between creativity and mental illness.
Yeah, it's quite the link.
It really is.
Yeah.
And today we're really excited to jump into a book that goes deep into the brain. The Master and His Emissary by Iain McGilchrist.
Oh, a classic.
It is, right?
Yeah.
And I gotta say, I was hooked from the very first chapter.
Really? What was it that grabbed you?
Well, McGilchrist talks about this patient, right,
Yeah.
who had a stroke that affected the right side of his brain.
Okay.
And afterwards, he couldn't even recognize his own leg.
Wow. So the stroke, it really messed with his perception of self.
Yeah. He just saw it as this detached thing, you know?
Like he didn't connect it to himself.
Exactly. And it just made me think, wow, our brains really do shape how we see the world, even ourselves.
Right. And that's kind of McGilchrist's big idea, right? Like the two sides of our brain, the left and the right, they don't just look different.
Yeah,
They experience the world in totally different ways.
exactly. So maybe we should break this down a bit. Can you give us the basics of these differences?
Sure. So think of the left hemisphere as this like master organizer, really good at breaking things down
Oh, yeah.
into smaller parts, analyzing and making sense of it all, like a map maker.
The left brain is logical. Gotcha. I've heard that before. But what about the right side?
Well, the right hemisphere is more about the big picture, the whole experience.
Okay.
It's where our emotions are, where we see patterns and kind of grasp meaning, like an explorer venturing out into the unknown.
Interesting. So we need both, right? Like the explorer needs the map maker's charts.
That's a great way to put it. But McGilchrist, he suggests that the left side, it can kind of, I don't know, take over sometimes.
Take over.
Yeah, it gets so focused on, its own systems, it loses sight of the bigger picture.
So it's like the map maker forgets there's a real world out there beyond the map.
Exactly. Fascinating. The right side, it's out there, getting its boots dirty.
Feeling the wind, you know. That's where creativity comes from.
Absolutely.
Which brings us to the whole mad genius thing. Does McGilchrist think that this, right brain dominance is linked to mental illness?
Well, it's not that straightforward.
Okay.
He's not saying all right brain people are mentally ill. It's more nuanced.
Okay.
But he does suggest that the right side, with its sensitivity and its unique way of seeing things, could be more vulnerable.
More vulnerable how?
Well, think about it. The right hemisphere, it's less about control, less about forcing order on a chaotic world, right?
Yeah.
It's okay with ambiguity, with not knowing everything.
Right.
And that can be incredibly, powerful for creativity, but it can also be unsettling, especially in a world that values certainty so much.
So it's not just that the right brain is creative. It's that its way of seeing the world can make it more sensitive to anxieties and uncertainties.
You got it. And this is where McGilchrist gets really interesting. He connects these brain differences to bigger trends in culture.
Okay.
He's saying that Western culture, especially now, it's become really dominated by left brain thinking.
You mean we're all obsessed with control and logic at the expense of actually experiencing the world?
Yeah. And while that's brought us amazing advancements,
Sure.
it's also come at a cost.
Like what?
A loss of meaning, feeling alienated from ourselves and each other,
Yeah.
maybe even a rise in mental illness.
Wow. This is really making me think. So it's not just about right brain versus left brain.
No.
It's about how they work together, how this tension shapes us individually and as a society.
Exactly.
Okay, so before we move on to that bigger picture stuff, I want to talk about something that seems to bridge this gap between the hemispheres.
What's that?
Music.
Yeah. Music. It seems to tap into both the structure that the left brain loves
Right.
and the emotional depth of the right.
Exactly. It can be both mathematical and deeply moving. It makes you wonder if music is like a key to understanding how these two sides can, work together.
Yeah, it's a fascinating thought. And, McGilchrist actually argues that music might be the ancestor of language. Like we were singing before we were talking.
Oh, wow. Brilliant.
It's a compelling idea.
Yeah.
That this ancient form of expression, it speaks to us in a way that goes beyond words.
I love that. Okay, so before we wander too far down that road, let's bring it back to the body.
Okay.
Because one thing that unites both sides of the brain is our physical experience.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. We've talked about how the right hemisphere is connected to our body, our sense of being in the world.
Yeah.
But even the left brain, for all its abstract thinking, it can't escape that it's housed in a body, right?
So even the map maker has to acknowledge it's drawing on the skin of a living being.
Right. And it brings us back to that patient, the one who couldn't recognize his leg. It makes you wonder what it means to be you, if even your body can become a stranger.
That is mind-blowing.
It really is a question at the heart of what it means to be human.
It is. Okay, well, we've covered a lot of ground today. The divided brain, the Mad Genius Thesis, music.
Embodiment.
Right, embodiment. But this is really just the beginning.
Yeah, we've only scratched the surface.
In the next part, we'll dive deeper into McGilchrist's ideas. How this tension between the hemispheres has actually shaped Western culture.
And what it means for understanding creativity, mental illness, and how we find meaning in a world that's increasingly dominated by the left brain.
Stay tuned, everyone. Things are about to get really interesting. Welcome back to the Mad Genius Thesis. Last time we were getting into how this whole left brain, right brain thing, it's not just about us as individuals.
Yeah.
It might have shaped Western culture as we know it.
It's a wild idea, isn't it?
It is. So where do we even start with this? Does McGilchrist give us the starting point? Like historically?
He does. He actually takes us all the way back to ancient Greece.
Okay.
Often considered the birthplace of Western civilization, right?
Right.
And you might think, ancient Greece, isn't that all about logic and reason? Total left brain territory.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. The philosophers, the mathematicians,
Right.
all about order and rationality.
But here's the thing. McGilchrist argues that this period was actually a time of incredible harmony between the hemispheres.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it wasn't just about cold, hard logic. Think about Greek tragedies, the myths, the emphasis on beauty and balance.
So it's like they had this synergy going on. The left brain providing the structure and the right brain bringing the meaning and emotion.
Exactly. And that's probably why they accomplished so much, both intellectually and artistically. But as we move forward in history, things start to shift.
In what direction? Toward the left brain, I'm guessing?
You got it. As we go into the Hellenistic period and then the Roman era, there's a gradual move towards that left brain dominance. The emphasis shifts to practicality, efficiency, control. Think of the Roman Empire with its huge infrastructure, legal systems, military power.
Right.
All hallmarks of that left hemisphere drive for order and mastery.
So the right brain's intuition and holistic perspective,
Yeah.
it starts to take a back seat.
Yeah, pretty much. And this continues as Christianity becomes the dominant force in the West. The emphasis on dogma, on a single absolute truth,
Right.
suppressing those earthly desires for spiritual pursuits.
The whole body is a temple thing.
Exact.
But wasn't there like a pushback against this during the Renaissance, like a rediscovery of the human form of beauty of the natural world?
Absolutely. The Renaissance was a big moment for the right hemisphere.
Okay.
We see this vibrant art, a celebration of human potential, a renewed interest in classical learning, like a breath of fresh air,
Right.
after that stuffy, left brain-dominated medieval world.
Okay, so the right brain has its moment.
Yeah.
Does it last?
Sadly, no. The pendulum swings back with the Enlightenment. Reason and logic are back in charge, but with a new focus. Empirical observation.
Okay.
Dissecting and analyzing the world as if it's, a giant machine.
This is where we get the scientific method.
Exactly. It leads to huge breakthroughs in science, tech, and medicine, but it also reinforces this idea that the world is predictable, controllable, something that can be mastered by the left hemisphere.
But then we have romanticism, all that passion and emotion, the celebration of nature.
Yeah.
It's like the right brain roaring back onto the scene.
You're absolutely right. Romanticism is like the right hemisphere's revenge. It's all about reclaiming intuition, emotion, the power of imagination. Think of those sweeping landscapes in art, the emotional depth of the music.
Right.
The Gothic novels with their, haunted castles and tormented heroes. It's about embracing the mysterious, the irrational, the things that defy the left brain's need for control.
I love how you're bringing in these examples. It really
Yeah.
helps to see how this all plays out.
Right.
But I sense a but coming.
Well, history is rarely a straight line, With the rise of modernism in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, we see another swing back to left brain dominance.
Okay.
But this time, it's less about reason and logic and more about abstraction, fragmentation, a detachment from the natural world.
So instead of trying to control nature, like in the Enlightenment,
Yeah.
modernism is more about looking inward. dissecting the human psyche.
That's a great way to put it. You see this in psychoanalysis, the fragmented narratives in literature, the abstract art. It's a world where the left hemisphere's drive for analysis has turned inward.
It makes you wonder if this constant push for analysis is what leads to that feeling of alienation, of fragmentation that you see in a lot of modern art.
That's a good point, and it brings us back to that link between creativity and mental illness.
Because if the right hemisphere, with its connection to emotion, is being pushed down, that could create a breeding ground for mental distress.
Exactly. Makes you wonder, could a better balance between the hemispheres actually lead to a healthier way of being in the world?
That's a question I think a lot of people are asking right now. But before we get into solutions, I want to explore more of what McGilchrist says about how we can reintegrate these two seemingly opposing forces.
That's a great idea. We'll pick up there in the final part of our discussion.
Welcome back to the Mad Genius Thesis. We've been exploring this idea of the divided brain.
Yeah, quite a journey.
It has been, and I have to say, it's been kind of heavy at times.
It's true. We've gotten into some deep stuff, haven't we? But, I think it's important to remember that McGilchrist doesn't just leave us in a world of, fragmentation.
Right.
He offers a way forward.
Okay, so what's the path? Does he give us a step-by-step guide?
Not really. He acknowledges that there's no quick fix, right?
Okay.
It's a process, this ongoing journey of self-discovery and cultural evolution.
Where do we even begin?
Well, he emphasizes that it's not about, suppressing the left hemisphere.
Yeah.
It has a vital role, It helps us analyze, plan, communicate.
Right, essential stuff.
Yeah, we wouldn't get very far without it.
We wouldn't.
But it's about recognizing its limits, and creating space for the right hemisphere to offer its wisdom.
You keep using the word wisdom when you talk about the right hemisphere. Like, it's not just creativity or intuition.
Yeah.
It's something deeper.
Yeah, I think that's a key point. McGilchrist argues that the right hemisphere is where we connect with meaning, values, our purpose, even our connection to something bigger than ourselves.
So how do we tap into that? Like, are there specific things we can do?
He doesn't give us a program exactly, but he does highlight certain practices that can help, like spending time in nature.
Nature. Really?
Think about it. When you're out in nature, you're surrounded by complexity, interconnectedness.
Okay.
It defies the left brain's attempts to categorize and control everything, right? It lets you experience the world through the right hemisphere.
I see.
You just be present.
Okay, that's pretty powerful. What else?
Engaging in creative activities. Anything that lets the right hemisphere express itself. Painting, writing, dancing, music, even daydreaming.
So it's not just about, watching a movie. It's about making something yourself.
Exactly. The act of creating uses both sides of the brain.
Okay.
But it lets the right hemisphere's intuition take the lead.
And speaking of art, I remember McGilchrist talked about art being a kind of bridge between the two sides.
Yeah, he said that true art, it's not just about technical skill or just about expressing emotions. It's a combination of both.
Can you give an example?
Well, think about a painting that captures both the detail of a landscape and the feeling of awe it inspires.
Yeah.
Or a piece of music that has, a complex structure, but also deeply moving melodies. These are works that engage both our intellect and our emotions.
Okay, so it's about finding a balance. Okay.
Exactly. A kind of synergy where the whole is greater than the sum of its parts.
I love that. So it's not about just doing right brain things or left brain things.
Right.
It's about finding ways to integrate them.
Yes. And McGilchrist argues that it's not just an individual thing. We need a cultural shift, too.
Okay.
Away from this exclusive focus on the left brain, on logic and control.
But how do we do that? Our whole society seems built around those things.
It's a big challenge, but it starts with, awareness, recognizing the value of the right hemisphere. Intuition, empathy, connection.
So it's about changing our values, about what qualities we prioritize.
Exactly, and about creating space for those qualities to grow. Like in education, we need to go beyond rote learning and testing, Cultivate creativity and critical thinking. A love of learning for its own sake.
It's a tall order, but it's inspiring to think that even small changes in our own lives can contribute to a bigger shift.
I agree. And it's a journey worth taking. After all, the human brain is incredibly adaptable, capable of change.
That's good to hear. So it's not hopeless. We're not, stuck being ruled by our left brains forever.
Not at all. We have the power to choose how we engage with the world, how we cultivate our minds, and how we shape our culture.
Well, listeners, we've reached the end of our deep dive into the divided brain, from the inner workings of our minds to the sweep of history and culture.
And I hope you've come away with a deeper understanding of your own mind and all its incredible potential.
Remember, it's not about choosing one side of your brain over the other.
No.
It's about finding that balance, that sweet spot where both hemispheres can work together
Right.
to give us a richer, more meaningful experience of life.
And who knows, maybe in rediscovering that right hemisphere wisdom, we'll find a path to greater creativity, more compassion,
Hmm.
and a deeper understanding of what it means to be human.
Thank you for joining us on this exploration of the Mad Genius Thesis. Until next time, keep those two hemispheres talking to each other.